Greetings fencers, this is another drill video going through the Zornhau or Wrath Hue. There's a reason it's the first technique in the Zettel. The principles found in these 6 lines are going to summarize 90% of your exchanges. The equivalent is also the first play in Fiore's sword in 2 hands. You can make the argument that, technique-wise, fencing is a fight for the centerline. The first thing we do is isolate the cut, making sure it crosses the centerline and controls their sword, making sure your hips are activated in the cut. Someone just approaches in long point to keep it simple. I will bring it up here at the beginning, but the principles found in the Zornhau are encompassing and can be applied to any cut. But the Zornhau itself is also a broad cut. It is shown in a variety of ways, both offensive and defensive. You can practice cutting extended into long point or retracted in a hanging, and everywhere in between, depending on distance, targeting, etc. And if they're really close, it'll just end up being a cut. Once we're feeling comfortable taking that center line, we then thrust. Again, it can be shooting freely or hanging and maintaining bind control. And some people's default cut is different. If their hands are high, you will not be able to just thrust forward. This is where we see a few manuscripts show bring the hands up in order to thrust over. With those out of the way, let's get back to the drill progression. We can practice stepping offline with our cut. This makes it significantly easier to take the center line. And if you step far and they don't move the sword, you don't even have to make contact. Then have them step backwards after the Zornhau to force additional steps. Then we make it against a cut. Timing becomes more important, and you'll notice if your structure is poor with them now impacting your sword. Keeping the arms extended and maintaining that diagonal cut, and always keeping the movement multiple choice. This is where you'll notice people change their cuts directly to a hanging, making it more of a wind to a hanging, i.e. absetzen, or setting off. That is valid, but not the drill where we want to use a cut for this task. Then you can add it into a 3D movement environment, keeping the same distance where you can just reach each other, and when they cut, use a Zornhau. So this was if you've taken the center line, or they were weak in the bind, etc. Now what happens if they go hard? This can be done if they immediately parry your Zornhau hard and take the center line, or if they push aside your thrust after a successful Zornhau. Set up the drill as before, and when you use the Zornhau and thrust, they displace it. You give up on that side and take off above and cut on the other side. This can be done with umschlagen or striking around as well. Both have pros and cons that I won't go into here, and there are many different forms and ways available to cut to the other side. We then add retreating like before, and this will lead to the cut, sometimes needing to become a thrust. Then add it into full 3D movement, and then make it multiple choice, where either your thrust lands, or it's displaced and you cut around. So that was the option when they are hard or we lose the center line. Now we have the option for if our opponent is smart and fighting efficiently. This is when we countercut with the Zornhau and they apply the proper amount of pressure that both points remain centered. This means a straight thrust will deviate and cutting around will be very unsafe. So we wind into our upper hanging, bringing our strong to their weak and thrust. There are lots of specifics with winding, so it's always good to experiment and try different ways. And as always, add retreating, then 3D movement, then multiple choice. And all the drills should be done on the left side as well, but we often set up the left side drills as a second cut. So to summarize, we have taking the center line, losing the center line, and both points being equal. Practicing each element, then stationary, then with linear movement, then 3D movement, and then multiple choice. This is the base plate we use for all our technique drills, finding the concept or principle being taught in the play, then building all the options up from that. Thanks for watching, keep studying, keep practicing.